here we are, letter 8. Good morning. It's Monday, and we're about to begin our second week going through the Screwtape Lenten series. I'm Jay Goodman, and this is Talking with a Goodman, Screwtape Lenten series, letter 8. My dear Wormwood, so you have great hopes that the patient's religious phase is dying away, have you? I always thought the training college had gone to pieces since they put old Slubgob in at the head of it, and now I am sure. Has no one ever told you about the law of undulation? Humans are amphibians, half spirit and half animal. The enemy's determination to produce such a revolting hybrid was one of the things that determined our Father to withdraw his support from him. As spirits they belong to the eternal world, but as animals they inhabit time. This means that while their spirit can be directed to an eternal object, their bodies, passions, and imaginations are in continual change, for to be in time means to change. Their nearest approach to constancy, therefore, is undulation, the repeated return to a level from which they repeatedly fall back, a series of troughs and peaks. If you had watched your patient carefully, you would have seen this undulation in every department of his life. His interest in his work, his affection for his friends, his physical appetites all go up and down. As long as he lives on earth, periods of emotional and bodily richness and liveliness will alternate with periods of numbness and poverty. The dryness and dullness through which your patient is now going are not, as you fondly suppose, your workmanship. They are merely a natural phenomenon which will do us no good unless you make a good use of it. To decide what the best use of it is, you must ask what use the enemy wants to make of it, and then do the opposite. Now, it may surprise you to learn that in his efforts to get permanent possession of a soul, he relies on the troughs even more than on the peaks. Some of his special favorites have gone through longer and deeper troughs than anyone else. The reason is this. To us, a human is primarily food. Our aim is the absorption of its will into ours, the increase of our own area of selfhood at its expense. But the obedience which the enemy demands of men is quite a different thing. One must face the fact that all the talk about his love for men and his service being perfect freedom is not, as one would gladly believe, mere propaganda, but an appalling truth. He really does want to fill the universe with a lot of loathsome little replicas of himself, creatures whose life, on its miniature scale, will be qualitatively like his own, not because he has absorbed them, but because their wills freely conform to his. We want cattle who can finally become food. He wants servants who can finally become sons. We want to suck in, he wants to give out. We are empty and would be filled. He is full and flows over. Our war aim is a world in which our Father below has drawn all other beings into himself. The enemy wants a world full of beings united to him but still distinct. And that is where the troughs come in. You must have often wondered why the enemy does not make more use of his power to be sensibly present to human souls in any degree he chooses and at any moment. But you now see that the irresistible and the indisputable are the two weapons which the very nature of his scheme forbids him to use. Merely to override a human will, as his felt presence in any but the faintest and most mitigated degree would certainly do, would be for him useless. He cannot ravish, he can only woo. For his ignoble idea is to eat the cake and have it. The creatures are to be one with him, but yet themselves. Merely to cancel them or assimilate them will not serve. He is prepared to do a little overriding at the beginning. He will set them off with communications of his presence, which, though faint, seem great to them, with emotional sweetness and easy conquest over temptation. But he never allows this state of affairs to last long. Sooner or later he withdraws, if not in fact, at least from their conscious experience, all those supports and incentives. He leaves the creatures to stand up on its own legs, to carry out from the will alone duties which have lost all relish. It is during such trough periods, much more than during the peak periods, that it is growing into the sort of creature he wants it to be. Hence the prayers offered in the state of dryness are those which please him best. We can drag our patients along by continual tempting, because we design them only for the table, and the more their will is interfered with, the better. He cannot tempt to virtue as we do to vice. He wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. Do not be deceived, Wormwood. Our cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring, but still intending, to do our enemy's will, looks round upon a universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken, and still obeys. But of course the troughs afford opportunities to our side also. Next week I will give you some hints on how to exploit them. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. And that is letter 8. It's a daily struggle to be a good man, but I can't stop. I always do my best to pick myself back up and keep plowing forward, because there's only backward and I don't want to go that way. Sometimes I do, but I try not to. I try to get back on there and on the wagon and keep going forward. So please join me in striving to be a good man for your wife and family, for your church, and for God. So how's Lent going for you? I'm curious. Have you been sticking to what you said you would give up? If you fell off, Monday morning is a great way to start off strong for the week and repent if you need to and get back up and keep going. But it's hard and it's difficult to do, but was it ever meant to be easy? Is that sometimes life is hard, sometimes life isn't fair, but we have to keep trying, and we have to realize that we are meant to do hard things. We are meant to be strong through those hard times, and that Goodmans do hard things. And I could even attribute that to this, as a good man does hard things. So I hope things are going awesome for you, and that you're fighting hard as we travel through this Lent. Today's theme of letter 8 is bad habits. Oh boy, that is definitely up my alley. I have had many bad habits in my life, and I struggle daily to keep those bad habits out of my life. And when I mess up, I get back up and I keep trying, and I have to keep moving forward. But I know that's everyone's favorite, right? I know, definitely not mine. But I rest on the verse for today, and with the theme being bad habits, the verse for today, I love it, and I make it so important to me, and I hope you do too. So the verse is, "And you he made alive when you were dead through the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience." Ephesians 2:1-2. If a person follows the world and all that's in it, they're dead in their trespasses and sins, even though they're alive. So who are the sons of disobedience? It's anyone that's not a friend of Jesus, to put it bluntly. Anyone who is not constantly amending their life and sticking close to Jesus and constantly growing is that son of disobedience. So in the desire to grow, sometimes comes periods of dryness, right? I mean, even Mother Teresa experienced a great dryness with the Lord for like 50 years, I think. And this is what Screwtape describes as periods of undulation. They're exactly that. There are the highs and the lows, the peaks and the troughs of our Christian walk. And they try to take advantage of those peaks and those troughs to keep us down and get control of our will. It seems like Screwtape wants Wormwood to capitalize on the patient's lows and take advantage of that, like I just mentioned. We will come back to that in a little bit, though. The first bit of teaching from Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood is to teach him about that undulation. Screwtape describes it as being directed towards an eternal object. His body, passions, and imagination are in constant change. He goes on to say that we humans live in time and the demons live in eternity. So we always have a choice until the day we die, right? But even if we are Christians, we won't always have a perfectly, spiritual life, and we won't always feel perfectly close to God, all pistons firing, so to speak. That is that undulation. The next part from Screwtape about how we, live in spiritual change constantly, that up and down, and that we will experience, as the book says, as Marlon says, those periods of dryness and periods of growth. It's based on getting control of our emotions and feelings, something I do struggle with. Screwtape wants Wormwood to take advantage of the patient's, that constant fluctuation in the Christian life. The first thing that comes to mind is that we should not put spiritual stock in our feelings and emotions. They really do affect every part of our lives, and they reveal how much character we have. The difference here between God and Satan is that with God, he wants a relationship, and he wants our hearts. Satan wants control of our will, as Marlon points out in his study guide. And it's here in this letter that I notice, Screwtape is showing weakness for the first time. I think it's the first time. Not that we ever thought demons were strong. I mean, they are only as strong as the fuel you give them, right? But Screwtape does two things here in his weakness. He underestimates the power of virtue and its effect on man. He forgets that, like Marlon De La Torre says, we have the distinct ability to love God even when we don't feel like it. I tell my kids this all the time. Just because you don't feel like doing something, it still needs to be done, right? So I've been trying to form new habits, especially during Lent, when I can supercharge the good habits and weed out the bad ones. I think we all can do that. And how we do that is to make ourselves do something we usually don't want to do that's good or better for us over and over and over, and eventually a new habit is created. We must have constancy and fidelity in the midst of changing emotions, as Marlon points out in his study guide. In the case of the patient, and I think all of us spiritually in our constantly up and down walk with the Lord in our life, we can have that constancy and fidelity while our emotions are constantly changing. And that's the thing. So the demons seem to only have one angle, which is hate. They hate us and they want us with them forever. So we need to form habits by having constancy and fidelity, even though our emotions change, and sticking close to God and building up that relationship instead of a relationship with bad habits. The Catechism says in Catechism 1734, freedom makes man responsible for his acts to the extent that they're voluntary. Progress in virtue, knowledge of the good, and ascesis, which is practice of penance, mortification, and self-denial, enhance the mastery of the will over its acts. The key to exercise control of our lives, like exercising in a gym, is to strengthen the will of us to stick to the God's will by sticking to it even when we don't feel like it. If we just make our body go, like move forward and do that next thing, we're going to move and get stronger eventually. And again, this is something I struggle with all the time. I am not speaking from a position of like perfect strength or anything. But I really want to pick myself back up and keep trying when I don't make my body go forward and do that next thing. But I mean, you've heard of fake it till you make it, right? Yes, make yourself do that thing, and eventually you'll follow spiritually. Eventually, if we do this, we will do good enough that we will perform good acts and not bad ones, and build to give the best versions of ourselves. Marlon quotes St. Gregory in the study guide, and it says the culmination of someone's hard work to gain in virtue of doing the good. He said, the goal of a virtuous life is to become like God. So lastly, the four cardinal virtues from Catechism 1805 to 1809 come up in the study guide, and they can help us, break those vicious habits that take us away from God. And they are prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. If you sign up for Bear's School of Manliness, by the way, side note, the teachings on his website is in the four cardinal virtues, right when you sign up and you start, going through the tools and the program, and it's amazing. I learned a lot. There's short little videos here and there and short little reads that really teach you well about the four cardinal virtues, and that's just a beginning. So check that out at bearschoolofmanliness.com. I challenge you to really meditate on Ephesians 2, 1-2, and in the Catechism read 1805 to 1809, and allow God to show us where we need better habits. So there you have it. Letter 8 is in the bag. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow when we continue doing this again for letter 9. If you would like to get a hold of me, you can email me, as always, at jgoodman.deepadventure@gmail.com. And you can find more of me and all of this kind of stuff at bearschoolofmanliness.com. And if you would like to donate to my show for future things I'm working on, some right now and some after Lent, you can donate at my Venmo, which is at jgoodman75, at JAYGoodman75. Thank you. I hope you have a blessed day. Pray for me, and I'll pray for all of us men and women listening too, that we stick really close to God this Lent and allow Him to help us work through, any bad habits we might have. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm out.